The bright studio lights of CNN's The Situation Room bore down on Kellyanne Conway as she adjusted her microphone. Her signature blonde hair was immaculately styled, her navy blazer crisp and deliberate. She sat with the practiced confidence of someone who had survived and thrived through countless political firestorms. Across from her, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett leaned forward slightly, her purple blazer cut sharply against the studio's blue backdrop, her expression a controlled mix of determination and barely concealed irritation. The tension between them was visible before a single word was spoken. What happened next would leave the entire CNN panel stunned. Wolf Blitzer opened the segment with the gravity that has defined his decades on air. Tonight, two of the most outspoken women in American politics face off, a conversation that began as policy discussion but may become something much more. The anticipation had been building for weeks. Crockett, the progressive firebrand, had been relentlessly criticizing the previous administration's policies across every platform willing to host her. Conway, the unflinching defender of Trump's legacy, had finally agreed to a face-to-face confrontation. What viewers didn't expect was how quickly Conway would seize control, interrupting Crockett with such precise timing that even the seasoned Congresswoman momentarily lost her footing. But it was Conway's final line, delivered calmly, surgically, that would silence the room and end the debate in a way no one saw coming. Before diving into this explosive showdown, viewers were urged to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more unfiltered political confrontations. Kellyanne Conway was no ordinary political operative. As the first woman to successfully run a presidential campaign, she shattered ceilings and rewrote the playbook. Her ability to reframe controversy into digestible soundbites earned admiration and outrage in equal measure. After stepping back to focus on family, Conway reemerged as a conservative commentator, sharper, more selective, and just as formidable. Conway doesn't just answer questions, she redirects entire narratives, said James Wilton, a former White House communications director. When she enters a debate, she's not participating, she's controlling it. In recent months, Conway had chosen her appearances carefully, but when Crockett implied on social media that Conway was afraid to defend the policies she once championed, that calculation changed. Conway accepted CNN's invitation almost immediately, setting the stage for one of the network's most watched segments of the year. Jasmine Crockett represented a different political force altogether. A freshman congresswoman and former civil rights attorney, Crockett had quickly built a reputation for unapologetic advocacy and razor-sharp questioning. Her viral moments during congressional hearings showcased the precision of a seasoned trial lawyer, methodical, relentless, and unafraid. She doesn't just speak with passion, noted Democratic strategist Maria Cardona, she brings lived legal experience into every fight. For Conway, this debate was about relevance. For Crockett, it was about legitimacy. Both understood that in modern politics, performance can matter as much as policy. As the cameras rolled, the tension was unmistakable. Tonight, Blitzer said, we bring together two women with starkly different visions for America's future, and neither is known for backing down. The first question seemed simple enough. Congresswoman Crockett, you've been critical of policies from the previous administration that still affect your constituents. Which concerns you most? Crockett didn't hesitate. What concerns me most, she began, is the lasting damage caused by judicial appointments that are now rolling back decades of progress on voting rights, reproductive freedom, and environmental protections. These weren't accidents, they were calculated. That's when Conway struck. With a slight smile and raised eyebrow, she cut in. What the Congresswoman calls rolling back progress is actually restoring decision-making power to states and to voters, not unelected bureaucrats. The atmosphere shifted instantly. If you don't mind, Crockett replied coolly, I was answering the question directed to me. And I'm providing context for viewers, Conway interjected again, unwavering, because what sounds alarming is often empowerment when you tell the full story. Blitzer stepped in. Let's allow the Congresswoman to finish, and then you'll have time to respond. Crockett nodded. Thank you, Wolf. As I was saying, these judicial appointments prioritized ideology over qualifications, and now we're seeing the consequences, decisions that disproportionately harm minority communities and undermine fundamental rights. The battle lines were drawn, and the clash was only beginning. Communities, working families, and that's simply not accurate, Conway interrupted again. The judicial appointments made were of highly qualified individuals, many with higher American Bar Association ratings than judges appointed under previous administrations. The real issue isn't qualifications, it's that the Congresswoman disagrees with their constitutional interpretations. Crockett's expression hardened. The patience she had carried into the studio was clearly thinning. "Miss Conway," she said sharply, "I understand that interrupting is your strategy to control the narrative, but the American people deserve to hear complete thoughts without constant disruption." Conway responded without hesitation. "And the American people deserve accurate information. When claims are made about limited qualifications, it's important to correct the record in real time. These judges graduated from top law schools, clerked for Supreme Court justices, and built distinguished legal careers long before their appointments." Around the table, panelists exchanged uneasy glances as the tension thickened. Political analyst David Axelrod leaned forward, attempting to intervene. "Perhaps we can structure this exchange more productively." "What would be productive," Crockett cut in, her voice rising just slightly, "is if Miss Conway would allow me to finish a single sentence without interruption." She pressed on. "This isn't about disagreement over constitutional interpretation. This is about judges who openly signaled their intention to overturn long-standing precedents that protected fundamental rights." Conway remained composed. "What the Congresswoman calls overturning precedent, others call correcting judicial overreach. Precedent isn't sacrosanct when the original ruling was flawed." Wolf Blitzer tried again to regain control. "Let's move to a different topic. Kellyanne, the economic policies of the previous administration—" "Actually, Wolf," Crockett interjected, "I'd like to address what Miss Conway just said, because it reveals a fundamental misunderstanding, or misrepresentation, of how constitutional law functions." Conway raised an eyebrow and leaned back slightly, allowing Crockett to continue. She knew her moment would come. "The judges appointed during the previous administration weren't simply interpreting the Constitution differently. They were selected precisely because they signaled a willingness to discard established precedent in favor of ideological outcomes. That's not judicial independence, that's judicial activism, just branded differently." Conway waited until Crockett finished. "That's a fascinating reframing, Congresswoman. When judges rule the way progressives prefer, it's protecting rights. When they rule the way conservatives prefer, suddenly it's activism. The reality is that many of these judges apply originalist and textualist principles, interpreting the Constitution as written, not as some wish it had been written." The debate soon shifted to economic policy, but the intensity didn't fade. Crockett cited statistics on income inequality, arguing that disparities worsened during the previous administration, even before the pandemic. "We saw tax policies that disproportionately benefited the wealthiest Americans." "That's not what the data shows," Conway interjected once more. "Middle-class families saw tax reductions, wage growth outpaced previous administrations, and unemployment reached historical lows for African American and Hispanic Americans. Those are facts, not partisan interpretations." Crockett exhaled sharply, her frustration now impossible to hide. "Miss Conway," she began, "do you think you could allow me to complete even one full thought without interruption?" Crockett asked, her voice edged with frustration. "I'm simply ensuring viewers hear both sides simultaneously," Conway replied smoothly. "When assertions contradict established economic data, it's more efficient to address them immediately rather than letting misinformation linger unchallenged." The pattern persisted as the conversation shifted to immigration. Each time Crockett described what she characterized as inhumane border policies, Conway interjected with statistics, human trafficking numbers, drug interdictions, asylum processing backlogs. Crockett's arguments were repeatedly cut short, while Conway remained unflappable, her tone steady and controlled. By the midpoint of the segment, the contrast was unmistakable. Crockett's exasperation was visible. Conway appeared calm, almost clinical.
Social media reacted instantly. Hashtags like Conway Interrupts and Crockett versus Conway began trending nationwide as clips spread in real time. The discussion reached a boiling point when the topic turned to January 6th. What we witnessed, Crockett began, was an unprecedented attack on our democracy, encouraged by rhetoric from, "Let me stop you right there," Conway cut in. "While everyone condemns the violence that occurred that day, your characterization ignores the millions of peaceful protesters who had legitimate concerns about election integrity. This kind of broad-brush demonization only deepens our divisions." That was it. Crockett's patience snapped. "Miss Conway," she said sharply, "your constant interruptions make it impossible to have a substantive discussion. This is exactly what's wrong with political discourse today: the refusal to listen, the constant talking over others." Conway didn't raise her voice. She didn't rush her response. "Congresswoman," she said evenly, "I've been in public service long enough to know that when someone avoids addressing counterpoints and instead complains about the format, it often signals